So we're going to move on. We've gone from we're going from sustainability to cyber resilience. So two areas that we really can't afford to falter on. So in a way, continuing from this morning's exploration of artificial intelligence and its transformative power, we've got to look at the counterpart as well, which is cyber resilience. And in today's hyper-connected world, cyber resilience, like sustainability, is not optional. It's a matter of economic survival. As businesses and governments rely more on digital systems, the risks of cyber threats have never been greater. Without effective cyber resilience, the risks are staggering: fraud, data breaches, and operational shutdowns that can cripple economies and slow growth. Conversely, investing in cybersecurity safeguards, critical services, etc., maintain trust and ensure long-term economic stability. So this session is not just about understanding these threats, but providing actionable insights on strengthening cyber resilience as an economic prerogative and imperative. So I would now like to welcome our chair, Dinanath Kolkar, to the stage, a leader with a track record in navigating complex digital landscapes and strengthening cyber defenses. And please join me in welcoming his panelists, starting with Ashwini Panse, Dattatreya Gokhale, Matthias Yeo, and Alexandra Gomez. So can we give them a big round of applause, please?
Good evening to all of you. A quick question: how many of you have got impacted with a cyber attack? Raise of hands. How many of your companies have got impacted? Okay. There are a few. We are lucky. About a year back, we launched a very interesting initiative on cybersecurity in the city of Pune through our Chamber of Commerce. We did it in collaboration with the US Consulate in Mumbai. And we focused on two very important tracks. One is on the education ecosystem and ensuring that many of our students are raising their bar as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And we're also focusing on a large number of MSMEs which are there in the Pune region to help them become more cyber resilient. But a very important aspect when we went through that entire journey was to get a sense of what if there is a planned attack. And Pune is a very important region as far as India's economy is concerned. It is in the top 5 districts as far as the impact it has on the Indian economy. And you have a large auto manufacturing sector. There is a large ecosystem of education institutions, IT sector. You have the entire pharma sector. So a lot of very critical setups which are there in Pune. And we shiver when it comes to the thought that if there is a focused effort to attack, we could not necessarily be well protected. So I just wanted to call out a few things as regards cyber attacks which have happened and the type of global impact, and specifically calling out the economic impact of cyber attacks. There was a ransomware attack in 2017 which infected estimated 230,000 computers across 150 countries. There was a MOVEit breach affected over 2,000 organizations across United States, United Kingdom, France, and many others. There was a Marriott hotel data breach which happened in 2018, and it compromised data of guests close to about 339 million guest records. And very recently, I'm sure many of you have seen the impact of it was not necessarily a cyber attack, but a flawed global update on a product called CrowdStrike, which pretty much impacted a lot of travel, a lot of economic impact, close to $1 billion. And there are various other impacts which have totaled up to very significant numbers. And there are some facts as far as these attacks and how these attacks are actually growing day by day. So India has experienced 46% increase in cyber attacks year over year. Organizations in India faced an average of 3,200 attacks per week. Over 1750 crore rupees was lost to cyber criminals just in the first 4 months of 2024. Globally also, the ransomware attacks have increased by 18% in 2024. Southeast Asia, specifically the manufacturing sector, and in countries like Thailand and Indonesia has reported quite a significant amount of local and global supply chain disruption because of cyber attacks. And finally we might think, okay, industry is getting impacted. Not so. Education and research sector in India is also increasing significant amount of cyber attacks. Approximately 53% increase in cyber attacks in just education and research sector. So these figures are an indicative of the world that we live in, and the fact that the things which really shook some of us who are in the core technology industry was what happened in Israel and what Israel did in Lebanon with the devices. So the type of things which could be possible. And what we did was we decided to focus on the economic impact of cyber attacks, but also give you a perspective of very diverse set of experts from across the globe. So if you look at this panel, we have Ashwini, who represents financial services industry. She's based in the US in Atlanta, but she also has a GCC in India. So she has a dependency of her business in India. And she's been an expert in risk management, and I'm sure she'll talk about it. So we have her representing a very interesting perspective on financial services, US dimension, as well as having a GCC in India. We have Dattatreya Gokhale, who happens to be a veteran from the naval services, so comes in with the defense background, currently works in the area of cybersecurity in Bosch, and focuses a lot on cyber physical systems. So again, an Indian perspective, a German company, again having set up in India, plus the defense sector, and his perspective would be very useful. We have Matthias, who has a strategic perspective on cybersecurity capability building, as well as a lot of technology. He's from Singapore and gives a very different perspective of how the Singapore government is developing various things to build cyber resilience and the type of things that he has been experiencing. And finally, the world cannot get a right balance unless we have representation from the European Union. And we have Alexander Gomes, who is from Netherlands. He is from the academia and brings in geopolitical and policy-driven approach to cyber resilience. And with expertise in technology governance and economic security, international cooperation. One of the things which he told me about, when we talked about collaboration, he said the biggest challenge Europe has is collaborating among the members of the EU itself. So he brings in that perspective. So with this, I thought it will be very good to have such a diverse set of experts representing different industries, different regions, different types of challenges that they have. So let me, to start off with, Ashwini, you've traveled the farthest for this event, and thank you all of you for being here, and also all your inputs, discussions that we've had in preparation for this session. So just wanted to start off with you, Ashwini. Give us a perspective from your side on where you see things in the financial services industry, specifically in the way the global business of your organization, which is Intercontinental Exchange, works, as well as its GCC.
Okay. Hey, can you all hear me? Okay. So thank you so much, first of all, Dina, for having me over here. And I also want to thank Pune International Center, Dr. Bambavle, as well as other members of PIC, as well as the Ministry of External Affairs for arranging this very important dialogue. With that, one of the things that just yesterday, as we were having dinner, upstairs by the pool, there was a book that was given to me, and it was a book on cyber resiliency. I think the authors are sitting in the room, Rohit Srivastav and Alok Karnik. I just flipped and I saw page number 17. And on page number 17, it says that if your company is spending more time on coffee, then you will for sure get hacked. And it was a quote by Richard Clarke, who was responsible for national security in the U.S. Many years ago. But just to modify that a little bit, if a company is spending more time, forget on coffee, but if it's not spending equal amount of time as it is spending on every other business objective that they have, I think you will get hacked in today's age. I cannot, emphasize how important cybersecurity is across the world. It's extremely important to ICE. I represent ICE. ICE stands for Intercontinental Exchange. We own a number of clearinghouses and exchanges in the world. We own the New York Stock Exchange. We have a data business. We also are in the process of digitizing our mortgage industry in the US. So in short, what does our company do? It basically is in the process of digitizing everything analog that we can see. From that, how do we do that, right? Technology. It's all technology, underlying our exchanges, whether it's New York Stock Exchange, whether it's ICE Clear Europe, whether it's ICE Futures Europe, whether it's ICE Futures US, everything is run on technology. And I just cannot emphasize how important the security of all of that technology is. So, if I may share an interesting tidbit, I have the honor to kind of participate in our quarterly risk committees that we do at ICE at a parent level. I do want to say that, our CISO, cyber security officer, is a part of each of those meetings. He presents, what the landscape is, what the threat landscape is, what are we seeing across the world, what are we seeing across the segments, what are we seeing in terms of issues that we are experiencing. The one person at ICE who doesn't get denied a dollar amount, we look at budgets every year, right about this time, we have a calendar year, Jan to December. Approximately in October, November timeframe, we finalize budgets, right? All the departments probably have a pushback. The one person who does not get any pushback in our company, that's our CISO. That's the commitment that the company has to cybersecurity. I'm sort of, I just want to divert away from ICE a little bit. Obviously, it's important for ICE, but the one other thing that I want to say is it's important for every financial company in the US. One of the things that we do see, just our network is so huge. We've got about, and we say this to, publicly to a lot of our members, we've got about 400, if we just look at our clearing segment, right, we have about 400 direct clearing members who come to us with a good level of capital, right? But we've got thousands of clients. And these clients, could be banks, they could be depositories, they could be, investment banks, they could be, but they're also the Glencores of the world, or they are the Trafiguras of the world, who are producers, who are, consumers. So there's plenty of clients who come to us, on a regular basis. And, I do want to speak from a broader financial industry perspective, how important, and, I think US has set a very good example on how, our network, how well connected we are as a network, but how well, secured we are as a network. We get, like, as a, I run, the enterprise risk for the clearing business at ICE, but, we also look at, enterprise risk across the company. Every day I have a question that comes either from a Barclays or a Goldman or a JP or a, one of the banks, or another custodian that we are working with, or we have a reverse repo arrangement with a bank, or just to name a few, and they'll ask us, please tell us that the money that we deposit with you is secure. Now, in the clearing world, when we had, for instance, we basically receive margin from all of these big banks, or somewhat smaller banks, to secure the risk, right? That comes with trading and clearing of contracts. When we had the war, Russia-Ukraine war, and this was back in, I want to say, December of 2021, when it was at the highest of the volatility, we saw peaks of contracts. For instance, we have a benchmark contract called Dutch gas. It's called the TTF gas. The amount of money that we were handling on a day-to-day basis was $260 billion. That's the level of, the highest we've seen. But, on a day-to-day basis, even today, we handle roughly in the range of like $150, $160 billion on a regular basis. This is money that I get to report every day, saying where that money is posted, how that money is securitized, and is that money safeguarded. So one of the things that we do obviously look at is, a lot of this money is moving around via the SWIFT networks, and it's globally, right? We've got members in UK, we've got members in Europe, we've got members in US, Canada, Singapore, everywhere. The money flows via SWIFT networks. So it is extremely important that these networks are well secured. And we look at the security of all the entire SWIFT network. We are responsible for that. And if SWIFT goes down, we have to also connect with the regulators, and the regulators are the Feds, and SECs and CFTCs of the world. In UK, we've got the Bank of England, and we've got the FCA, who will poke at us and ask us, what are you doing to ensure that this money doesn't get lost? And so there's a lot of, I think, moving into, recently we had the World Economic Forum in Davos. I follow that somewhat, and one of the things obviously that was discussed as a part of this forum was cybersecurity. Few things that were highlighted, and I think they're spot on, because they mimic and they mirror what we see and speak with our board of directors, our stakeholders on a quarterly basis. One, the supply chain risk, right? We've got a huge supply chain risk. All of our companies depend on vendors that supply us whatnot. And they supply us through technology, through services, whatever it is, they connect with us, right? What if that, for whatever reason, supplier or vendor pushes a malware unintentionally into our network? How are we securing all of that, right? So that's obviously one of the largest risks. I think Dina talked about CrowdStrike a little bit just a few minutes ago. And I want to say that, that was July 19th, if I'm not wrong, when CrowdStrike happened, and I was in Pune. And I was watching how the world responded to it, how our companies responded to it, all the way from India to UK to US as people were waking up. And how we were responding. My own company was impacted. I think, thankfully, we had other tools as well, so it wasn't across the segments. We had S1, we had Tenium, other things that we use, and which was helpful, I think. So one of the things that I think is discussed across the world is just the diversity of the suppliers that we've got. Do we want to depend on one supplier or vendor to kind of provide us with whatever services they're providing? I think that's the highlight. I think the other piece that got talked about as a part of the WF is just the geopolitical tensions across the world. You've got Russia, Ukraine, you've got Israel, Palestine, you've got US, China, and just, as we have Trump, who got elected, with tariffs coming on, I think that was one of the most expected pieces as Trump goes and, levies some of these tariffs. Is China going to have some protectionist measures, or are they going to start hacking into systems, or doing other things? So there is that geopolitical risk, which still we had it. I think last year. Last year was the highest I think the year with the highest number of elections, and it continues to be the year where we continue to see geopolitical tensions across the world. I think just to wrap up, a couple other things that obviously we look at is AI. That is another big risk that we are seeing. Not only from AI is helping your crime actors to become more sophisticated, but also there's a big risk in terms of how various companies, how well do we understand AI? And if we don't understand it as well, there's going to be members who are going to take advantage of the vulnerabilities that they see. So there is, that piece of AI, supply chain, geopolitical tensions. There's a regulatory framework that's always fragmented. You have US doing one thing, you have EU doing another thing. You have UK doing a whole nother thing. And so there's always going to be that fragmentation. So unless we all come together for some sort of a cooperation, in terms of setting a baseline or set of standards, that's going to remain an issue. And then the last piece, before I hand over, I think, is the skills. I think there's a raising, there's a cyber haves, and then there's a cyber have-nots. And I think that gap is, increasing more and more as we see some of this stuff. But, I'll maybe come back to, additional stuff, but maybe I'll just pause and then let...
Thanks, Ashwini. I'll probably move on to Matthias. Matthias, you have been talking a lot about critical infrastructure and public-private partnerships in enriching things, and give your perspective from a technologist perspective. How do you see the things evolve? What are the type of things which are very unique in Singapore specifically you spoke about? Give us your viewpoint.
Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to thank the organizer, the government of India, for inviting me over here. It's really a pleasure. It's my first time in Pune. This place is amazing. Yeah, I just want to share a little bit. I am a technologist. So many times when people talk about cyber attacks, right, they talk about what happened. Well, I know how it happens. So in a sense, if you have any question about how things happen, just let me know. I mean, later we can have some audience question. But in cybersecurity, one of the concerns that they have is on OT security, or we call it critical infrastructures. These are your power plants, your water plants, things that if it's bring to a halt, it affects the economy. And we call it as critical services. Many times we thought that cybersecurity is about malware, it's about defending against cyber attackers. But unfortunately, we don't know the kind of operandi that they are approaching on. Just give an example. In, I think, 3 years or 4 years back, California, all of us remember, if we talk about OT attack, we talk about Stuxnet, right? But that's so long ago. That was like 15, 16 years ago. If you talk about the recent attack, just in California, there was this employee who left, was fired from a water plant. He came in, he logged in back to the environment, and he created certain kind of commands to the PLCs, sorry for the terminologies, the attack, and he poisoned the water. And it remains undetected until there was these engineers who saw his mouse moving uncontrollably, and he called, and immediately they stopped the attack. So this is only like 4 years back. And we talk about just 3 years back, and in fact, I think it's last year, sorry, 2 years back and last year. Queensland, very near to us, they have a attacker that has been camping inside their water plant for the last 9 months, undetected. And so the attacker decided to do some attack, and they were shocked. And they dated some of the files back all the way to 9 to 10 months ago. Now, this is the critical infrastructures that is unprotected. And often we think that, hey, we should have some cybersecurity personnel there, right? Unfortunately, sometimes because of the lack of understanding, they don't know how to approach it. Just now, Ashley was talking about something very interesting. He says, when her CISO say the budget, nobody push back. Most of the time, I know that in other companies, everybody push back the CISO. Some not just push back, just kick him out of the room because it's so hard to justify. When nothing happens, is it because you're doing something right? Or is it because nothing happened yet? And are we supposed to invest more or invest less? So it became a very complex matter about even cybersecurity budget. So going back to Singapore about the public-private partnership, right? Singapore government, we realized that we cannot do everything ourselves. There is a strength in harnessing between the different entities. Like, there's some things that private do better. I'll give you an example. Before I started my research firm, right? Right now I'm doing cyber research for the government. But before I was here, I was the CTO for Symantec. Symantec, if you've heard of Symantec before, right? Symantec has about 400 million endpoints across the globe. What does it mean? That means when a malware first appears, we know where is it. We know sometimes how people write malware, right? Hackers think differently. When they write a malware, it will start somewhere, but actually that's not the targeted location. Then after that, it starts to spread, and that is where they really target. That's where the target happens. So we know where a malware starts. We know who wrote it. We know how it focused on. We know it's like COVID. We know who is the country that started that most. So private does have strength. And that's why when government partners with private, right, they get insights that they don't have. But there are something that government do better that private don't. For example, government can link and send circular to their internal critical infrastructures. For example, you know your countries, you know who are your water plants, you know who are your power plants, you know what to protect, you know what attack that can happen to your organization or to your countries. So when this partnership forms, besides public-private partnership, there's also bilateral government relationship. Because when a state-sponsored attack, and I say state-sponsored, right? When you talk about criminal hackers, they just want to do something quickly, want to steal something quickly. State-sponsored is different. They are very smart. Often when we think about cybersecurity, we equate it to technology. Like, for example, it must be a technological thing, cybersecurity is like that. Hackers are not like that, especially state-sponsored. They are not targeting the technology, they're targeting the people. That means they are targeting you and me to see your behavior, your organization, the nature of it, and because of that, they then launch the attack. And when there's a bilateral agreement between governments, you can see how the hackers start moving towards different countries, targeting different industries with their purpose, and you can identify their intention. So all this relationship helps a lot. And like cyber, it's not really a technical thing, even though I'm a technologist. It's actually an economic thing, where how we can do this together and protect together. I think I'll stop here. Yeah.
Thank you, Matthias. Very useful perspective, especially around critical infrastructure. So even India suffered one impact in Mumbai on one of our large power plants. And this happened just post-COVID. And we could clearly, the people who were investigating it clearly pointed out to a very planned attack on it. So I think it's very important to people to realize that impacting critical infrastructure will have much more resounding impact on the economy, and important focus required. Alexander, your work in Europe, tell us about how things are shaping up, especially around the regulations, the NIS2 directive, plus the challenges that you highlighted on how European Union as entity works in collaboration, the type of challenges that you have seen getting different countries to participate and come to the terms with arriving at some of these regulations. Yeah.
Hi. Firstly, thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. Coming from Europe, we in Europe are often seen as not sufficiently engaging with others. I think that's fair criticism, and I'm very happy to be learning a lot about India and Indian relations with other countries. So that's great. Another thing that the EU is known for is regulation, and some say overdrive in regulation. I would argue that when it comes to cybersecurity, well, on the one hand, there is a fair comment. We do regulate a lot, but also I would think and I would argue that that's quite important to do. Over the past 10 years, there has been a growing attention and focus on big tech in Europe. Firstly, because we realize we don't have big tech in Europe. So if you look at the cloud sector, for instance, over 70% of the cloud market in the European Union is dominated by 3 companies, and those are Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. And that's across the board, the reality that we have. And so GDPR was really the first piece addressing cybersecurity related issues. And in this case, of course, you know it for being the General Data Protection Regulation. It has been put in place in 2018. And it was the first of its kind where privacy was put at the center of the concern and the discussion, and we eventually got to a piece that has been served also as a blueprint for other countries, including India, to address privacy and data-related concerns. And in case I often get this question, do you guys ever implement it and actually go after those who don't comply? Yes, we do. I actually just checked this morning the numbers, and the highest fine ever was for Meta, 1.2 billion euros of a fine. And number 3 is again Meta, 400 million euros, and number 2 was Amazon, 750 million euros that these companies were fined for mismanagement of data of individual citizens. After GDPR, a whole lot of other regulations came up, and on cybersecurity, I would highlight maybe just 2 or 3. One of them is the Digital Operational Resilience Act, which is focused on the financial sector only, maybe sort of showing how we never recovered from the 2008 financial crisis trauma. But it is something that the European Commission put forward, and it has been now implemented as of this year, actually. The other 2 pieces that I will mention are the NIS, so that's the Networks and Information Systems Directive, which focus on critical infrastructure. So we don't want to get surprises. We still do, obviously, but we have put this piece in place in order to protect, indeed, energy, transport, banking, healthcare, water management, and even with the latest update, NIS 2, we also look at manufacturing, space, and the food industry. So in case you are wondering, yes, the EU is expanding the scope of what is to be regulated when it comes to cybersecurity measures. Final piece that I'll mention, and I'll stop the boring bit, is the Critical Resilience, the Cybersecurity Resilience Act, which again expands the scope of what is to be regulated. And so think of also any kind of hardware and software. If you work with IoT, if you are an Indian SaaS company, or if you develop an app, you now have to build in security by design, and including, say, encryption, multi-factor authentication, and so on. So if you want to sell your app via the App Store in Europe, we also have to comply with these new regulations. I know that's a lot, and that's a lot also for us. So European member states, they don't always have the same opinion about what is and constitutes a risk. A clear example that I can give is Huawei. Huawei is seen by some countries, the Netherlands, where I'm coming from, as a no-go. And so there's now a process of all the telcos to get rid of Huawei equipment. Some other countries are a bit later, or are a bit on a different pace when it comes to in this case, mobile networks equipment. And it's the same for these regulations, because some of the ones that I mentioned are acts, that has to do with EU lingo, but that means are implemented across the Union. Some others are directives. So the NIS, which focus on critical infrastructure, is a directive that has to be implemented at the national level and translated into national law. And that also happens at different speeds. If you add the geopolitical element to that, of course, some countries are more aligned with the US. Some other countries, Hungary, I'll give it as an example, are less concerned with China or Russia than most of our member states. So also there's a gap. But in any case, I think if you ask the average EU policymaker, you'll quickly get to the conclusion that, one, regulation is good, and also from the businesses, I've been hearing this every now and then and more often, which is, I think, a good thing. Regulation provides security both to citizens and consumers, but also to companies so that they know what they can count on. Of course, there's some burden when it comes to the initial steps when people are trying to understand these regulations, but ultimately the idea is that we get better together. And just maybe to close for now, internally, we do try, and some of the, for instance, NIS2, but also the Cyber Resilience Act, have specific measures that aim to uniformize and reduce the fragmentation of these regulations across member states. So the European Union Cybersecurity Agency has now a mandate to coordinate and create a platform for greater coordination with member states. So that's internally what we're trying to do, and the new European Commission, the new Commission of the European Union that's just initiated the new mandate for 5 years, has as one of its main goals to reduce the overlap that exists between some of these regulations. So simplification is a key word at the moment. So that's internally, and then externally, sort of take use of the so-called Brussels effect. The idea that came up with the GDPR, that regulation at EU level can be used and serve as a blueprint for others, is also something that the European Union is certainly looking after. And yeah, another piece, and I will conclude now, the AI Act will also probably be one of those pieces where we'll be very much looking forward other countries adopting an AI secure way of developing technology. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. I think there's a great opportunity for institutions like PIC to collaborate on some of these efforts that you're driving. Dattatreya, over to you now. And you know, we've all, you know, the question which was asked, did you drive in your own vehicle? The question which was asked, was your vehicle secure? Could somebody have hacked into a car, which many people probably don't realize that that's an absolute possibility. And you are now into the automotive sector. You know, you have also been in the defense side of it, and you've seen the type of controls that are required to build in any of the mechanization, anything which the defense forces procure. So give your perspective on cyber physical systems and various things that you see as challenges and opportunities.
Thanks. At the outset, thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel here. What I'm going to do is, I see three parts to this question. Cyber physical systems, I see the automotive domain, and I see defense. So I'm going to start with the cyber physical domain first. And just to give a little bit of context as to why we find ourselves here talking about cybersecurity for industries. Over the last 20 years, you've seen a significant increase in the ability to compute, the ability to store data, and the ability to access this data and to scale. What that means is that we've changed the way we could instrument, we could measure, and the way we could control industrial processes in our industries. Talk software-driven machinery. And then you have AI and data ML added to this. And now suddenly, you have this rich, granular set of data that's available from the factory floor, which you can connect to a business process and really look to derive real-time insights and actually, you know, make productivity gains, look at sustainability improvements, and possibly even meet certain regulatory requirements. But you know, the first law of system thinking, as Peter Senge says, is today's problems come from yesterday's solutions. I'm probably misquoting it here a little bit, but essentially what we've done is that we had a castle with a moat, and we lowered the drawbridge. And now we've created a huge attack surface for people to come in and attack us. What I'm going to do is to use what cybersecurity companies do often, is to sell the apocalypse to get you to buy a firewall. So what I'm going to do is to step back a little bit and talk of three attacks, and the reason I'm going to talk of them is to kind of build an arc of what I'm trying to get at. The first is what Matthias referred to earlier, 15 years earlier, Stuxnet. the first known weaponized piece of malware, targeted to target a particular industry, a very, very specific set of controllers. I'm sure if all of you've heard about it. It destroyed the myth that if you separated your network from the internet, you couldn't get hacked. The second is what is known as Triton. It was discovered in 2017 in a Saudi Arabian petrochemical plant. It attacked what was called as the safety instrumented systems. Typically in an industrial scenario, you will have a process control system, and you would have a safety instrumented system that runs on a completely different network, is supposed to fail safe and to ensure that if the process control system fails, you can still go and ensure that automatically through your control systems, you bring down the plant and you don't cause physical damage. So Triton attacked this. And not only did it attack it, it did things like it was able, so this system had 3 redundant controllers talking to each other. Any disturbance in the state would bring the whole system down. Triton was able to penetrate that. It was able to overcome issues such as proprietary communication protocols. They re-engineered all of that. The third one that I want to talk about, of course, Triton didn't cause damage because it brought down the plant by mistake and it got detected. And the third one that I'm going to talk about is 2022. It's called Pipe Dream or Industroyer. It's, if you may, the Swiss Army knife of malware. And what it does is essentially really lowers the bar for an attacker to attack an industrial control system. And the arc that I'm trying to build here is that from 2008 to 2023 today, you moved from nation states to script kiddies being able to attack your industrial control systems. But there's a paradox here. It's not as easy as it sounds. Typically, when you get inside an industrial control system, and it's often very easy to do that, is that you require very specialized knowledge to be able to make an effect. So that's the paradox that you need to tackle. But what happens now is that when you put AI into this mix, suddenly, the threshold of being able to engineer an attack drops significantly. And just as an example, we had a symposium in Bosch just last weekend. We put up an attack demo using an open source ICS, virtualized ICS system. I don't know embedded programming. I used Claude to write an attack that brought down that PLC. So it's probably a trivial example. So what do we do? How do we protect this? And I think you have to go at it and I'm going to talk of 3 ways to do it. The first is people, process, technology. And I say it in a very specific order. Typically, in a cyber security or environment, the most weakest link is the person. So what do? You use technology and process to overcome human fallibility. You use processes and humans to get technology working right. And you use humans and technology to ensure that you have the right processes in place and they are followed. The second piece is looking at certain principles of security. Security by design, I think Matthias referred to it, I think Alexander referred to it. Studies have shown that slapping on security later and later in the product development stage increases the cost multifold. The second part of it is a risk-based approach. So you have finite resources as a business, capital, human resources. You need to deploy them wisely so that you actually tackle the threats that exist. And it's not a very uncommon thing. I think the financial world follows it to the T. And most other cybersecurity, pieces will talk of risk management. It's a piece that nobody really wants to get into. A little bit of art more than a science, but yes. The third part is layered defense. You want the border, you want somebody in between, you want a moat, you want the castle walls to be high enough, and then you want somebody standing on the castle walls to make sure that nobody's crossing the moat. And the third is to limit the blast radius, as we say it. Make sure you design your system such that if somebody gets in for whatever reason, you kind of limit the damage that he's going to cause. A lot of English, how do we do it? So one way to get at it is frameworks. And frameworks really help you to think of this problem in a very systematic way. So there are cybersecurity frameworks like NIST, CSF 2.0. They talk of approaches like identify what you need to protect, detect somebody encroaching, then respond to the problem, recover from it, I think I missed a step there, but yeah, that's really what it is. But there are other, and I'm coming to the resilience part here, there are resilience frameworks which look at it slightly differently. And there we're talking of anticipate, withstand, recover, and adapt. And the focus here is to acknowledge the fact that you're going to get attacked. There is no way we're going to get away with that. And so you build in resiliency from the point of view that if you're going to get attacked, can you withstand, absorb some of the attacks that come your way? How fast, how quickly do you get back to business as usual, right? So that's really the industry part. If you want me to go to the automotive side, do I have time or?
No, we'll take it up later. What I will also do is call out some of the initiatives which are happening across the globe on collaboration. Like, I'll probably give a couple of minutes to each one of you to talk about collaboration in each of your regions or your industry. If you can call that out, and then we'll open up for questions. Just a couple of minutes each. Yeah.
Just on the collaboration bit, I think one of the, I'm witness to, all the conversations that have been having, over the years amongst all the regulators, right? We have the benefit to kind of speak with IOSCO, and on IOSCO is, all the countries, right? We've got AFM, we've got MAS, we've got all the US regulators. There's a huge discussion around how do we get to a same framework, how do we get to the same baseline? We're all learning from each other. There's industry groups like FSISAC, there's industry groups like FSARC, there are groups that are led by the Department of Treasury in the US, and various others, right? Every country has their group, and we are witnessing discussions that are going on, again, on the back of attacks that are happening. So we had CrowdStrike, we had the Colonial Pipeline that happened a few years ago, that impacted the gas pipeline in the US that flows from Texas to New York. At the back end of all of these attacks or events that we are seeing or the incidents that we are seeing, there's a huge amount of collaboration that's going on where, for instance, just the NIST framework, there are certain things that are really good about the NIST framework, and more companies are trying to adopt that across the, the public and the private sector. So while, I do understand that, there's a lot of regulatory fragmentation, and there's a lot of, it's one of the risks that, maybe are we doing more in the US but not so much in the EU, or not so much on the east side. I think we are all learning from each other, and I'm seeing these based on number of conferences that we attend. So again, it's going to take some time for it to happen, but it's happening for sure.
So I think the US specifically, Ashwini, has been at the forefront of many of these cybersecurity collaboration. In fact, the work that we are doing, which is on critical and emerging technologies that US and India has signed up, and the cybersecurity initiative that we are running in Pune is part of that initiative. So Dattatreya, you would like to go next on any collaboration related aspects. A couple of minutes.
Sure. So what I'm going to do is to kind of break down collaboration in the cyber world under 4 heads. Not talking my industry in specific, but that's what really gets done. The first is standardization. And it's very well understood that if you want economic, and you want to make economic sense out of it, you need to standardize. And standardization happens at many levels: protocols, interfaces, data formats. It reduces the cost for building applications. It reduces the cost for changing things. You don't need to break the whole system. You can do it in pieces. The second part I want to talk about is sharing intelligence and information. And I come from the defense background. The wide seas, there are no borders. You don't have the power to control or to understand what goes on in the maritime domain. Sharing information is the only way to be able to handle this. There are a lot of frameworks, open source and closed, that are used to be able to share this kind of information, attacks, methodologies, vulnerabilities that exist. The third part that I want to talk about is regulatory harmonization. And that really reduces the cost of compliance. It makes sure that if you build a product in India today, you can sell it to the EU, or if you can sell it to somebody else, and you don't need to do much to change that picture. The problem there is conflicting regulatory requirements. Typically, just off the top of my head, you want to have data to be retained because it's a financial data for some amount of time, but then you have privacy on this other side which dictates that you can only maintain it for X amount of time. And now you have two regulations conflicting. How do you resolve this? And the third part, and this is really something that possibly you could think of, is we don't look at legislation as an indirect means of collaboration. And I kind of refer to what Alexander said earlier. When nation states, or when blocks of nations like the EU come out with regulations like the GDPR, and force countries like India to kind of mirror those regulations, and take them forward. In the automotive domain, you have R155. We mirror it in AIS 189, 190. We are collaborating indirectly and in making sure that we have a more safer environment around us.
Matthias, Singapore has emerged as a key player in collaboration in the Asia-Pacific region. And you have the ASEAN Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, the Australia-Singapore Cybersecurity Arrangement. So give us some other data points which could be useful for the audience on collaboration.
Okay, thank you so much. I think my previous two speakers covered a lot of points. So let's go to the specifics. I think it's more of a belief system because we know, we felt, this is what we believe, that cybersecurity is a team sport. We cannot be isolated and try to do everything ourselves. I also know the hackers world, right? The hackers are quite interconnected by themselves. So actually, they are sharing information more than what the good guys are. So I think for government, I will just touch on 2 points. The first collaboration is like government between governments. I felt that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just see the strength. Every government or every country has their own strength. Like for example, in our country, we set up this thing called Nice Lab, whereby we test on the IoTs, and we really test to take out the chip, I don't know why the government invests so much. I was really impressed at it, but we really go and drill down to the electrical level to see whether potentially this IoT could have been poisoned. So when other countries heard that, they say, hey, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's just leverage on your lab. And we also leverage on other people's lab. So this collaboration actually helps us to speed up our area of wanting to secure, because I think sometimes you are running out of time. We can build up a lot of things in our pipeline, but the hackers are not waiting. They're just ready to strike. The second thing is the collaboration between the government and also the companies. So in the sense that I realize this, that sometimes the companies are looking at the government as regulators. And when you see government as regulators, usually you share much less. You're more careful because you see them as someone who want to fine you. But actually, most of the time, we really want to help. So this collaboration actually helps by, you can voice out your concern, we solve problems together, come together and say, hey, we want to secure as a nation. Many of us, we think that maybe you're just an SME, maybe you're just a company, but actually you could be a supply chain to something even bigger. Maybe it's because of your products. That's why you're supplying to all the way to the critical infrastructures. So for Singapore government, we are looking at a few tiers, not just the governing the critical infrastructures, but their supply chain, even up to tier 3 to tier 4. Whereby we see who are interconnected that could potentially harm the supply chain, harm the critical infrastructure unknowingly. Yeah, I think that's more the specifics.
Alexander, last word on cyber diplomacy.
Yeah, I can only subscribe to what has been said regarding the importance of harmonization, standardization, of course. In the Netherlands, we are known for our tulips, for our bikes, but we are also known for our canals. I live in Amsterdam, and the city center of Amsterdam is 2 meters below water level. So it's not like I sleep very well at night, but I know that over centuries there has been a tradition of cooperation that has allowed the country to exist as it is. And the Dutch have a saying which is, God created the world, but the Dutch created the Netherlands. And I think we should keep this in mind when we think about cybersecurity. It's one of those areas where we can just afford. We've been talking a lot about fragmentation over the past few days. It's one of those areas where we can't afford that. And the cost of not acting is much higher than the cost of acting now and acting together. And that includes acting among states. So if we think about cyber diplomacy, the European Union has engaged with, usual suspects, the US, UK, Japan, UN, but also with India via the Trade and Technology Council. I don't know if you know about this, but it should be a strategic forum for EU and Indian officials to align on many topics, but one of the working groups is really about cybersecurity. So I would expect that, when we talk about new regulation on cyber and how that impacts, as I mentioned earlier, an Indian app that to be sold in Europe, I would expect that the Indian government communicates with its business community and informs about these developments. And I think in Europe, I'm certain we don't always do that, and we have a lot to improve. And that's like the communication cycles with each other are very relevant. And the other element that I'll just add is, I think also it's a way of diplomacy, is as Matthijs was mentioning, the cooperation between private and public sector. I think cybersecurity is really an example where accountability is not clear. If you look at critical infrastructure, Joe Biden said it himself in 2021. In Europe, that's a given. Massive chunks of our critical infrastructure today are managed by private sector. But the citizen who loses access to electricity or water will not blame Microsoft or CrowdStrike for what happened. We'll blame the local official and the local government. So the awareness about where responsibilities start and end should also be a very important point of attention. It's something that the EU is trying to improve with the latest acts that I mentioned, but is not sufficiently done, I feel, in Europe and elsewhere. So that's also something to keep in mind and to learn from Singapore, I heard just now.
Yes, so absolutely a great amount of opportunity to collaborate. I think it's a great opportunity now to collaborate with the audience as well and have them share their set of questions, any discussion points you would like to raise. What we'll do is we'll take 3 questions. We have roughly about 10 minutes. Just go one after another, then we will let the panel respond whichever way they want. Yeah, there are 2 questions right here.
Mr. Gomes and Mr. Gokhale, my question is for you with regards to EU policy. So India has rejected the Budapest Convention of 2001 on cybercrime, citing sovereignty concerns and lack of involvement in its drafting. Similarly, China and Russia, through the SCO, have also argued that it gives foreign law enforcement too much access. They've claimed it ignores cyber sovereignty and it fails to effectively address cyber terrorism concerns. And now with, specifically international AI-driven cyber threats on the rise, like we mentioned, cybercrime, cyber warfare, do you think that the Budapest Convention needs to be reformed to stay relevant and to include those states that have not ratified? And additionally, Mr. Gomes, you mentioned that enforcement in the EU is strict. In your opinion, should the EU be more flexible in its approach to include these major nations in its policy frameworks? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll take the next question as well.
Hello. Hi. So the panel has discussed the private, economic and geopolitical context. So my question is regarding, cybersecurity is very much essential for national security, and an impactful example of the same can be the cyber attack to disable the Viasat KSAT satellite launched on the day when Russia invaded Ukraine. So I would like to know your views on the collaborative action to address the cyber warfare threats to the national and international security, taking into consideration the continuous advancements that are going on in the cyber as well as space technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Yeah. Alexander, you would like to go first?
I'll refer to the first question. Let me put it like this. I think in Europe we often fail when we say that we are, when we focus on values and we are value-centric and human-centric and so on. And I think cooperation in cybersecurity, and given even the title of the session, economic resilience, we should also talk about shared interests. and it's of no one interest to have, I mean, we can talk about cybersecurity, but the CrowdStrike example is not even about cybersecurity. It was not about a cyber attack. So I think we should just talk about shared interests, shared economic interests as well at that dimension, and consider the impacts that we feel every day. The CrowdStrike attack stopped the Schiphol airport. The Schiphol airport is the airport in Amsterdam, and it's one of the biggest hubs in Europe. And the airport had to close for a few hours because there were no computers. What I mean is, let's focus on our shared interests, and we can talk about the Budapest Convention. We can also talk about the UN cyber framework. There is a gap. There's a certain fragmentation in terms of how we look at cybersecurity, and the willingness to achieve agreements on that. And we should form a coalition of the willing, and just go ahead and create these coalitions with our partners and those who have the common interests with us. Regarding EU flexibility, yes, I think what I hear, and I think we in the EU have to listen to our partners, is that it's often very difficult to comply. I understand that, and maybe we should think of mechanisms to give some extra time to our partners to get adjusted to regulations that we put in place, because regulations are put in place at a certain date, regardless of the origin of the products, for good reasons, but maybe we should think of intermediate steps to also engage others, because that also, of course, is a step towards greater cooperation in the long run.
So I may just like to add on, there's a question around AI-driven changes and type of things which need to be revisiting certain aspects. So Pune International Center, for example, has been a policy advocacy organization, and we'd love to have inputs on some of the papers that we're writing. In fact, we actually ran a contest around AI in cybersecurity on how AI can actually be used to counter attacks which are made using AI. So some of these things potentially will have an implication on some of the regulations which have been made, and it always gives us an opportunity to invite young minds to contribute towards it. Dattatreya, you may want to take the question around national security and...
Sure. If I got a question right, I think what you were asking was that you see international threats, do we need to collaborate internationally on cybersecurity? Did I get that right? The import of the question? Right. Okay, so let me put it this way. Should? Yes. Will it happen? That's a big question. Why? Typically, in my opinion, countries have interests. Where interests intersect, they will come together and form certain laws, take certain steps. If I take the liberty of comparing the cyber domain to the maritime domain, you often look at the seas and call them what are called as the global commons. I'm sure the economists here are going to point out and say that they're not really the same, because I would say global commons need to be non-rivalrous, if I remember correctly, and there's another term, essentially non-exhaustible, if I get it right. And that's not the case with the cyber domain, but I'm just taking the liberty of comparing it. So you have what is called as the UNCLOS, or the United Nations Conventions for Laws of the Sea. There was an agreement on what regulations should apply to the maritime domain. How do we look at the maritime domain in terms of laws? What's the writ from your coast outwards? What can you do? It was ratified probably 30 years ago, but still there are countries in the world that they have not ratified those treaties as part of legislation in their own countries. They use parts of that to do freedom of movement exercises and things like that, but still their own interests dictate that they don't ratify it into law. Take the cyber domain. Where your interests come together, you may actually end up forming a convention or this thing that dictates largely how you police this amorphous domain. But whether that actually translates into something you can implement or something that's going to give you results at the end, that's a big question to ask, and it's probably the jury's out on that.
I think the amount of data which gets generated around cyber attacks, I think it's absolutely a great opportunity to come up with AI-based recommendation engine on which collaborations are more fruitful and which will lead to better economic resilience. With that, I'd like to conclude this panel. It's been wonderful collaborating with all of you, and I'm sure that the objective of Pune International Center, as Dr. Mashelkar says, it's the international center in Pune. This is a classic example of collaboration, and we look forward to taking this collaboration forward with a focus that we have in our vertical on science, technology, and the innovation ecosystem. We are going to focus on digital public infrastructure in a big way. And cyber resilience on that would be very crucial, and absolutely would look forward to collaboration with all the different stakeholders. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, give them a big round of applause. And could I invite Ambassador Bambavale to come up to offer tokens of appreciation? Ambassador, if we could start, okay, let's start with Alexandra Gomez. Thank you. Big round of applause, please. To Matthias Yo. To Ashwini Panse. And to Dattatreya Gokhale. Perhaps we could get a group photo. And of course, to Dina Kolkar. And let's get a group photo on the stage. One last round of applause for them. Thank you. And panelists, if I can ask you to stay on this stage for a minute. Can I ask you to stay on this stage? Just for 1 minute. Because as we come to the end of this insightful session, we have a special moment to recognize some brilliant young minds. Dina talked a couple of times about the competition that was held. And as a run-up to today's discussion, PIC conducted a white paper writing contest, as he alluded to, on the theme of AI and cybersecurity. And we're thrilled to announce our 2 winning teams, and we'd like them to come up on the stage and be felicitated by Dina and the team. So in second place, from the International Institute of Information Technology, we have Bhagyashree Thorat, Soumya Sharma, and Atharva Patil. Can we have you up? Please give them a big round of applause. As Dina said, you know, these white papers, these ideas that these young people, come this side. The ideas that these young people are coming up with are things that could go into policy very soon. So congratulations to all of you. And I think Nilesh has a small prize for all of you. Thank you, team from IIIT. Thank you. And the first place winners from Symbiosis Center for Information Technology, please welcome Isha Chavan and Anubhav Mathur. Congratulations.